Hi, it's Charles McCall again, and this is part two of Introduction to First Timothy. This is not intended to be a deep theological study. It's really, I just started reading First Timothy. I just finished reading the book of Acts in my morning devotions, and decided I was going to follow up with that by reading through the pastoral epistles, First and Second Timothy and Titus. And so in the introductory thoughts, I use the John Maxwell Leadership Bible. I enjoy doing that. And so John had some very good thoughts about Paul and Timothy's relationship, specifically on mentoring and training leaders. And so in my first session on this introduction to First Timothy is the principle of purposeful pursuit. The principle of purposeful pursuit, and that is where we are constantly looking for leaders. It's key to church growth. It's key to longevity, constantly looking for leaders. So the first principle, Paul went into Lystra, and he was looking for leaders. He was looking for people who had potential. The second point that John Maxwell brings out here in this introduction is the principle of proven potential. Paul did his homework on Timothy. He recognized him as a diamond in the rough. He watched Timothy prove himself in his hometown while growing up, and he knew Timothy's family and the spiritual stock he came from. And so as we're looking at leaders, as we're looking at developing leaders or mentoring relationships, it is good to know the history. Again, we need to be careful about choosing someone quickly, but we look at somebody who has potential. The principle that I use, Jesus said, if somebody is faithful in the small things, then they're going to be faithful in the big things. And so I look for people that are faithful in the small things. And just to be honest with you, if I see people that are not faithful in the little things that I've asked them to do or somebody else has asked them to do, then I wait. I look for people that are faithful in the small things, the principle of proven potential. Third, Paul demonstrated the principle of practical patience. Paul patiently selected and mentored Timothy. He was careful not to act prematurely and even advised his student in 1 Timothy 5:22, don't lay hands on anyone hastily. He believed his team had acted too quickly in letting John Mark travel with them, Acts 12:25, and he didn't want to pick fruit too early. So again, we want leaders. We need leaders to move forward and see the kingdom of God established, to see our family established, our business established. We want leaders, but we have to be careful. We should always be looking for leaders, but we should see leaders that have potential. We see a spark of something in their lives, but we need to give them time. We need to give them time to develop that and to not choose somebody too quickly. Remember what I said in the first lesson, and I think this is important. We want leaders, but first we have to just look for faithful Christians. And then the next step is faithful disciples. And then we choose somebody that can be developed as a leader. So we don't want to lay hands on anybody too quickly. We don't want to choose too quickly. I thought it was interesting what he said about he believes his team had acted too quickly in letting John Mark travel with them, Acts 12:25. He didn't want to pick fruit too early. So I remember the story of John Mark leaving the work. He traveled, I believe it was Paul and Barnabas. He traveled with them, but then something came up. He missed Mama and Daddy, didn't like sleeping on the floors and mats, didn't like the persecution or something, and so he left the team. And so Paul didn't want to make that mistake again. So there's a balance of choosing somebody too quickly and releasing them too quickly, and then waiting too long to choose somebody and waiting too long to release somebody. And so we really need to look at the fruit and seek God and see what's coming out of their lives. You know, the way that I do this, and the way that Jesus did also, is that you give somebody a little bit of experience. You give them a little responsibility. My philosophy is low motivation, low skill. A new person needs high supervision. And so basically, I tell them what to do. And as I see them making the right decisions, I see them being faithful in those little things and producing some fruit. Well, then I allow them more and more control in what they're doing until eventually they have, almost full control, and I'm just in a mentoring relationship. And so we want to follow the principle of purposeful pursuit. We need to be looking for leaders. The principle of proven potential. We look for leaders, but we're looking for faithful Christians first. We're looking for faithful disciples first, and see somebody that has the potential, but we need to then move on to the principle of practical patience, of waiting with them and seeing what develops out of their life before we move them to the next step.